Have you ever imagined a world where no one feels alone in their struggles? What would happen if generosity became stronger than fear? And what if faith didn't just live in words, but in the way people shared everything they had? In a time of uncertainty and growing faith, something extraordinary began to unfold among the early believers. Their lives were not marked by wealth, status, or power, but by unity. A unity so deep that it reshaped how they saw possessions, relationships, and even their own identity. They were many individuals, yet they lived as one heart. There was no division among them, no silent competition, no hidden comparison. Instead, there was a profound sense of belonging, a quiet but powerful understanding that what one person had was not theirs alone. It was part of something greater. Their faith was not theoretical, it moved through their hands. It showed itself in their choices. It breathed through their daily lives. Those who owned land or houses did something unexpected. They sold them, not out of pressure, not out of obligation, but out of love. And they brought the money to the apostles, placing it at their feet. This act was more than generosity. It was trust. Trust that God would provide. Trust that their needs would be met. Trust that the community would care for each person as if they were family. And the apostles took this responsibility seriously. They distributed resources to anyone who had need, not based on status, not based on merit, but based on need. No one was overlooked. Imagine that for a moment. A community where no one is invisible, where no one suffers silently while others look away, where needs are seen, acknowledged, and met with compassion. This was not a perfect group of people. They were still human, still learning, still growing, but something had changed within them. They no longer clung tightly to what they owned. Instead, they held everything with open hands, because they understood something deeper, that their true treasure was not in possessions, but in their shared faith and love. Among them was a man named Joseph, whom the apostles called Barnabas, meaning son of encouragement. And that name was not just a title, it reflected his spirit. Barnabas sold a field that belonged to him and brought the money to the apostles. Quietly, faithfully, without seeking recognition. He didn't do it to be praised. He did it because he believed in what they were building together. A community shaped by grace, a community rooted in love, a community where giving was not loss, but gain. This kind of life challenges us, because it goes against the instinct to protect, to accumulate, to secure our future through what we own. We are taught to hold on, to save, to build for ourselves. And while wisdom in provision is important, the early believers were a different dimension, a heart that is not controlled by fear. They remind us that generosity is not about how much we have, it is about how much we trust. When we trust deeply, we release freely. When we release freely, we create space for something greater than ourselves. The early believers didn't just share possessions, they shared life. They carried each other's burdens. They celebrated each other's joys. They stood together in uncertainty, not as isolated individuals, but as one body. And through this unity, something powerful happened. Grace was upon them all, not just on a few, not just on the leaders, but on everyone. There was a visible presence of God among them, not because they were perfect, but because they were aligned in heart and purpose. This is the kind of faith that transforms communities, not a faith that stays hidden. Not a faith that only speaks, but one that acts, one that sees a need and responds, one that refuses to ignore suffering. One that understands that love is not complete until it is given. In today's world, this message feels both inspiring and challenging. We live in a time where independence is often celebrated more than interdependence, where success is measured by accumulation rather than generosity, and yet deep within, there is still a longing for connection. A longing to belong, a longing to be part of something real. The early believers show us that this longing is not misplaced. It is a reflection of how we were created, to live in unity, to care for one another, to walk together in faith. But unity does not happen automatically. It requires intention, it requires humility, it requires a willingness to see others not as separate, but as part of the same journey. And perhaps most importantly, it requires trust in God's provision. Because when we believe that everything depends on us, we hold tightly. We become guarded. We fear loss. But when we believe that God is our source, we begin to loosen our grip. we begin to see that what we have is not just for us. It becomes a tool for love, a channel of grace, a way to reflect the heart of God. This doesn't mean everyone is called to sell everything they own. The deeper message is not about the action itself, but about the posture of the heart. A heart that is willing, a heart that is open, a heart that asks, how can I help, instead of, what can I keep? Because sometimes sharing doesn't look like selling property. Sometimes it looks like giving time, listening without interruption, offering support when someone is struggling, standing beside someone who feels alone, encouraging someone who has lost hope. These acts may seem small, but they carry the same spirit. They say you are not alone. They say what I have, I share with you. They say, we are in this together. And that is where transformation begins. Not in grand gestures alone, but in consistent, faithful acts of love. The early believers didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait until they had more. They responded with what they had, right where they were. And through that response, a powerful testimony was created. A testimony that continues to speak today. It speaks to a world that is searching for meaning beyond material success. It speaks to hearts that are tired of isolation. It speaks to anyone who has ever wondered if a different way of living is possible. Yes, it is possible, but it begins within. It begins with a shift in perspective, from ownership to stewardship, from isolation to community, from fear to trust. And this shift doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey of learning to let go, a journey of discovering that true security is not found in what we hold, but in who we trust. As we reflect on this passage, we are invited to ask ourselves some honest questions. What am I holding on to too tightly? Where is fear limiting my ability to give? How can I reflect this kind of unity in my own life? These questions are not meant to bring guilt. They are meant to open a door to deeper faith, a door to greater connection, a door to a life that is not centered on self, but on love. Because when we begin to live this way, something changes. Not just around us, but within us. We become lighter, more open, more aware of the needs around us. And in that awareness, we begin to see opportunities, not as burdens, but as invitations. Invitations to love, invitations to serve, invitations to be part of something greater. The story of the early believers is not just history. It is a mirror. A reflection of what is possible when faith becomes action, when love becomes visible, when people choose unity over division. And perhaps today that same invitation is being extended again, not to replicate the exact actions, but to embrace the same spirit, a spirit of generosity, a spirit of compassion, a spirit of shared life. Because in the end, it is not about how much we own. It is about how deeply we love. It is about how willing we are to give. It is about how faithfully we reflect the heart of God in the way we treat one another. And when we do this, even in small ways, we become part of that same story. A story of grace, a story of unity, a story that continues to unfold. Thank you for watching this video. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who may need encouragement today.